Alright, so this is the second part of chapter 18, which is Return of Law and Order. And here's a disclaimer. We'll zoom in for a while. And then let's get back to the original picture. So I'll be continuing from the part that I left off from last time. The door was wide open. "Hey Tassels, are you here?" Ephraim said out loud. There was silence for a while. Then a woman came out. "Who are you guys?" she said. Ephraim was bewildered, but he maintained his calm composure. "We are business customers of Tassel's. We need to see him as soon as possible to borrow some documents he has. So, may I ask regarding his whereabouts?" "He's at his grape field tending to the plants," she said. Suddenly, a man approached the door. "Hey, Priska, who are you talking to?" It was Furious Gage. It took a while for Ephraim and Apasios to notice because he was well dressed and looked so unlike the homeless guy they interacted with a week ago. Priska was about to speak, but Furious Gage interrupted. "Is that you, Ephraim, Apasios, and Placidus? It's good to see you three." Furious Gage spread out his arms in joy. Ephraim, Placidus, and Apasios greeted Furious Gage, then introduced Officer Kai and Lucio. "I can guide you to where Tassos is. Come, follow me." Furious Gage walked out of the house. As newly made friends, Ephraim and Apasios walked with Furious Gage on their way to meet Tassos. They got to know that Furious Gage is going to start his work in the local fishing industry as a manual laborer. Also, he is currently studying so that he'll be prepared to manage the mining complex when it comes time for him to do so. Tassos was helping Furious Gage on his studies, since he had past experience in managing the mines, and things were going great for them. And soon, Furious Gage will start paying rent to his cousin as he earns money from the fishing industry. After some time walking out of the city, they saw the grape fields. "Look!" Furious Gage pointed at the grape fields. "All these grape fields are properties of Tassos. He is going around the fields maintaining his plants." "What do you mean by maintaining the plants?" Ephraim said. "Making sure that his workers are watering the plants in the rightful way, and looking to see if there are any weeds to remove. He also gives his love to all his plants one by one," Furious Gage said. "He gives loves to plants?" Ephraim flinched. "How strange." "Oh, I get what you mean by giving love to plants. One time, my grandparents came to my house to reside for some time. Then, one Sunday, a woman from my church, who knew my parents very well, gave a vase of flowers to my grandmother as a gift. She adores flowers very much, and she spent daily in looking, feeling, and speaking to the flowers regarding how beautiful they were and how nice their aroma. I don't know if there was any day in which she failed to do that. In the end, when they left, the flowers immediately lost their colors and died the next day. And that was after a month of having the flowers," Pasio said. Furious Gage clapped his hands once. "Yeah, see, Frame? That's pretty much what I mean when Tassos gives loves to his plants. Sometimes he keeps on talking to them that it's quite creepy." Ephraim simply smiled and nodded in agreement. "There he is! Hey, Tassos!" Furious Gage shouted. Tassos looked back and he noticed who they were. Then he immediately ran over to them. "What's going on, Gage?" Tassos said. He then greeted Ephraim, Apasios, and Placidus, who in return introduced Officer Kai and Lucio to him. After that, Ephraim told Tassos regarding the reason why they came. Tassos slowly nodded. "So, I see that you guys are in desperate need of my documents. I'll spare some time getting you guys as needed." Tassos then led the way with Furious Gage back to his house. They were talking with each other just like old friends, and it was good for Apasius to see. "Priska, give us something to eat," Tassos said as he walked into his house. The five soldiers thanked Tassos for inviting them to his house for lunch and sat around the table with Furious Gage. A while later, Tassos came out with his hands full of stacks of papers and laid them at the counter near the dining table. "You guys seem hungry. I hope our lunch will be suitable for you. Tassos came to sit with them. As he was saying, Priska laid out the food for the men. Ephraim's mouth became wide open. These are more than enough for us. Thank you very much. After giving thanks, the men started eating. Ephraim took a bite out of a piece of bread. Hey, the sweet bread is really good. Yes, my wife is a great cook. People always love her food, Tassel said. Wow, this is more like a banquet than a simple lunch. The seasonings on fish hit the spot, Officer Kai said. Man, I always wanted to have me some of those olives. And she filled my cravings right there, Placida said. Others spoke out their approvals regarding the food. Later, Tassos found the right time to say, Thanks for the compliments. It's good to see that you all are enjoying the food. However, what happened to Thomas? Wasn't he you guys' leader? Tassos looked at the soldiers one by one. Ephraim cleared his throat. He had to stay back to oversee the mining area. He and other soldiers are cutting down trees at the moment. Tassos nodded. Furious Gage looked at Tassos. Tassos, you seem rather busy today. Do you have something to do after lunch? Yes, I have to meet up with a big customer to discuss about the barrels of wine he's going to buy and the prices thereof, Tassos said. Tassos, I've always wondered, how did you make such a sudden shift away from working in the mining complex to the winery? Placida said. Tassos chuckled. It wasn't a sudden shift, because I've learned how to make wine as a side job and to support the community in its fix on wine. Also, my health deteriorated by great margins while working in the mines of Siderocalcia. That's the main reason why I quit working there. Your health has deteriorated by how much? Ephraim looked at Tassos. In what ways? Tassos paused to think. Some years into working there, I started having a bit of trouble breathing and began to be more stressful towards the end of my stay there. Is it because of the bad smoke from those kilns? Not to mention the labor intensive work and the teamwork with all kinds of people and the place demands of you, Furious Gage said. I guess. I'm not too sure. It's definitely not by dealing with crazy people there, nor was it because of labor. I was good with them, so I guess you're right, Gage. It must have been due to the smoke, Tassel said. Yeah, it must have been, because isn't hard labor supposed to make you free? Ephraim said. You're absolutely correct, Ephraim. Labor does make you free, Tassel said. How do you become free when you're doing hard labor? Isn't it supposed to make you miserable? Abbasio said. When we say that labor makes you free, we aren't meaning it literally. Tasso drank some wine. Of course, you're heavily toiled and your body aches from the top of your head to the bottom of your feet. However, hard labor, especially physically intensive labor, makes your mind to be clearer, which in turn makes you to be more at peace. Thus, free from various thoughts, especially painful ones. Apotheos didn't understand it very well. Ephraim surely noticed it, so he decided to add something more to Tasso's explanation. Apotheos, let's say that you had a fight with one of your friends and you feel very angry. You come back home, and your father tells you to go harvest the wheat field. You spend a long time harvesting with the sickle, and there comes a moment when you feel the weakness of your muscles and you get quite tired. Wouldn't you think by that point you would have forgotten about your anger from the fight you had with that friend? Apotheos understood clearly by this point, so he nodded his head in agreement. I get you now, Ephraim. I would surely forget about everything by then. Yeah, it's just like that. When your body is tired, you think about nothing else but the fact you're tired, and that you're yearning for some rest, Ephraim said. Apotheos felt very good to have learned another lesson for today, so he smiled in satisfaction. However, Lucio had another idea. Officer Ephraim, why do you frequently resort to using various life stories to explain something? It's getting old. Lucio said in an irritated tone and scowled. Ephraim looked carefully at Lucio for a while and ate a chunk of his fish. Lucio, Apotheos is still new to our organization. He has eyes to see and ears to hear, but he doesn't have yet an understanding regarding the underpinnings of certain messages that other people talk about. That's why I need to explain it in such a way for him to understand. Lucio stared at Ephraim. I don't know what you mean. This time it was Lucio who fell silent due to his lack of understanding. You see here, Ephraim chuckled. It's now you're the one who doesn't understand. When I talk about understanding certain messages, I'm saying that's not an easy thing to do. It's because such understanding comes by experience and through such much interaction with different kinds of people who converse a lot. Therefore, on those people who are still new at it, I would have to use stories to make the explanation simpler and easier to understand. Placidus and Officer Kai chuckled and muttered out their agreements. Therefore, Lucy was utterly crushed, so he simply nodded and resumed eating. Hey Ephraim, why did Lucy call you an officer? Do you rank higher than him? Furious Gage said. Yes, in fact, Kai and I are officers among us. Well, I guess we've gone astray in our topic of conversation. Where were we again? Ephraim said. We were talking about how labor makes us free, Tasso said. Come to think of it, Apasios, wouldn't you think the punishments that we get are included in the labors that they're talking about? Lucius said. Yeah, I definitely agree. I just wish that the fortress trainers would let us rest after doing some of those push-ups. I'll think about nothing else other than that, Apasios said. Tassos looked on as Apasios and Lucio talked, thinking beyond those complaints. Don't you youngsters think that those have helped you over the long run? Apasios and Lucio thought for a while, weighing the options. I guess so. I was much weaker than Apasios in my beginning weeks. He's really good compared to living here for such a short time, Lucio said. Apasios looked at Lucio in disbelief. Is that for real? Yeah, I couldn't even do one push-up properly when I started, Lucio said shamefully. That is true. I witnessed his improvement over the course of those months and years, Officer Kai said. Oh, I remember that. He was always so slow and weak that we never put him in the battlefield for the first year, Placida said. Actually, longer than that. The previous raiding we had was his first, Officer Kai said. You guys went on a raid? Furious Gage said. Both Tassos and Furious Gage were curious. Ephraim looked at them and realized that they were never told about the Principal Fortress soldiers' lives. After a while of silence, Ephraim cleared his throat. We frequently go on a raid. We lose people during those times. We lost 9 men this time. However, this is a way for us to make our living. I'm sorry to hear about your loss. How is fighting out there? We civilians are always curious regarding the battles that soldiers face and how they feel throughout them, Tassel said. To be honest, we raiders don't have it as hard as the city infantries who need to defend against professional troops. For example, around a decade ago, the Thessalonica infantry had to defend against the Turkish troops, and they had to deal with the Venetian assumption of the leadership, Ephraim said. Also, whereas the regular city infantries would be content with just chainmail armor, spear, sword, and shield, many soldiers in Principal Fortress have heavy armor, shield, 2 kinds of weapons, and for some of us, crossbows and guns as special weapons, Placida said. Yeah, and their raiding is usually against the light militias of various villages and towns, so it's quite easy to fight, Officer Kai said. Placidus, what did you mean by 2 kinds of weapons? Furious Gage said. If a soldier is a melee soldier, then he'll have a primary weapon and a secondary weapon. For example, a mace and a short sword. If a soldier has a special weapon, then he would have a melee weapon as a secondary, Placidus said. That's very interesting to hear. Tassos gazed at his guest. But I wonder, though, other than making your living, what's the purpose of your organization? A sudden silence fell amongst them, and nobody spoke for a while. Therefore, Tassos attempted to make things easier for them to understand. You know the Constantinopolis infantry's purpose is to keep Constantinopolis safe, and possibly aid the smaller cities like Salimbria when the Turks invade them. So, with that in mind, what's your organization's purpose for existing? Tassos blinked his eyes a few times, hoping for an answer. It seemed Tassos was pushing difficult levers to get his curious mind resolved. Apasios felt Ephraim's confusion and noticed that Placidus, Officer Kai, and Lucio were feeling the same. Ephraim, didn't you say that it's because we want to carry out our own vengeance upon the Turks who have always ravaged and raided our people, Apostle said. Ephraim looked at it for a while. Oh, yeah, yeah, that's right. He then looked at Tassos. Tassos, that's our answer. Plus, Placidus laughed in an uneasy tone. Sorry, we were just too busy living our lives that we almost forgot about our organization's motto. I mean, somebody should take a throwing the vengeance on them. Officer Kai cleared his throat. Don't we have to come to the aid of Constantinopolis when the city is under siege? I'm quite sure that has to be the case, or else, why do we exist? Ephraim said. And all soldiers laughed uncomfortably. They never really put much thought to such question before. Living in a poverty-stricken and unemployment-abundant regime, everyone was just thirsty for a job. Hey, Tassos, have you ever served in the military? Placido said. No, I haven't. But I know that but I know what it's like when you're facing the enemies. The Turks came to raid Siderocalcia a few times during my stay there and took away silver. And yes, that's another reason why I left that place, Tassel said. Actually, I've never faced enemies directly during my service in the Principal military. Because I'm an engineer, I'm exempt from participating in hand-to-hand combat. Therefore, these new recruits such as Apasios and Lucio have more experience in it than me, Placidus said. Suddenly, Ephraim looked at Placidus with a funny expression. Hey, Placidus, where were you when we were fighting the Turks on our ship? I was below the deck tending to the kids, Placidus said. Officer Kai flinched and looked at Placidus. Were all staff members doing that? Cowering below? Well, yes, Placidus said in a shameful tone. Ephraim simply sighed and let the topic die out. He decided not to go forth in talking to Placidus regarding the fight at the wagons. Therefore, the men went about talking various other things involving the mining complex, regarding how they are going to set it up, and the future dates that the group will come visit Tasso's house for further information. In the end, they were able to inform Tassos in sufficient knowledge and help them clean up the table and set around desserts. After that, they all sat around the table again to look over Tasso's documents from Calcia. Hey, Placidus, look here for example. What do you think about the drawings? Tasso said. Placidus nodded slowly as he was looking at the drawings. They are very informative and precise to the smallest details, especially those about the kilns. Wait, what's that inside the kiln drawing? Tassos looked at as Placidus pointed at something. Oh, that's the measurement for the bricks that are inside the kilns. Placidus flinched back due to an unexpected answer. He then looked at Tassos. We would need bricks to make kilns? Yes. Why are you surprised, though? Tassos said. I've never seen the insides of them, Placidus said. Tassos sighed. You guys have a long way to go then. But make sure that you have set schedule to comply. Ephraim leaned closer to take a look. Yes, we'll discuss about this on Thursday with the rest of our group members. Then the soldiers took some time looking over the documents. They would ask certain questions to Tassos, and he would explain to them. However, it soon became time for Tassos to leave. You know what? I need to get going now. I have to meet up with that customer. Tassos started walking away. Yeah, go for it, Tassos. A man has to focus on his main job first, Furious Gage said. Tassos stopped and turned around to look at Furious Gage. Oh, that reminds me. When are you going to the harbor to work? Tomorrow, Furious Gage said. That's good. I'm so happy to see you like this. Have fun talking with those guys. He then went to his room to get himself ready for a meeting with his customer and later went out of the house in joy. He is a joyful man, Ephraim muttered as he saw Tassos going out. Yeah, he really likes talking to people, so he needs to do it as much as he can, Furious Gage said. Then the soldiers spent some time looking over the documents. Lucio flipped over the pages and found out the things which he would like to read. He then moved over to a corner to try to read them without interruptions. Ephraim and Officer Kai were looking at the drawings of mining communities and learning about what kind of people worked there. Furious Gage and Apasios were eating desserts and only had a few pages of the documents in front of them. And last but not least, Placidus was the most engaging one out of all of them, and it seemed as if he was in a world of his own without anything bothering him. Also, due to his engineering knowledge, he gathered around the hardest documents to see. And Alfred muttered in satisfaction, amazement, and delight as he looked over them. The time went by swiftly, and Ephraim was starting to get anxious about returning to Prinkeeple. Ephraim cleared his throat to get attention. Guys, I feel like we need to leave now. Officer Kai looked around. Yeah, I agree. We need to leave. Tomorrow is a training day. Ephraim stood up and walked over to Placidus and tapped on his shoulder. Come on, Placidus, we need to go. All right, just hold on a while longer. Placidus held the document and showed no signs in letting it go. No, we can't. Ephraim tapped on the table. Just take whatever documents we have selected and let's leave. Yeah, look. Officer Kai pointed at a large stack of papers in front of Placidus. Those are more than enough already. Our whole group will be overwhelmed just by looking at them. He also stood up and walked over to Placidus. It took a while longer for them to finally stop Placidus and pack together the documents to leave. Furious Gage, do you know if we could buy some wine from your cousin's place? Ephraim said. I think so. Let me ask Priska about it, Furious Gage said and went away. Then he came back. I got the keys. I'll lead you guys there. Then they followed Furious Gage to the winery to buy enough wine. When it was done and they came out with the barrel full of wine, they bade farewell to Furious Gage. I hope we weren't such a nuisance in the house, and we thank you very much for the hospitality, Ephraim said. Oh, not at all. Thank you for visiting. It was nice to have you guys, Furious Gage said as he waved them away. After that, they parted ways, and soldiers sailed away from Solumbria. Alright, so I'll end it there, and next time around I'll post the remaining of the chapter 18.